Well, if his target audience is the Australian electorate, perhaps it does help to muddy the waters. If his target audience is the French government, the French people, the international community, other allies, partners, rivals, and partners, then it will, I fear, simply confirm what they're already accusing Morrison of, which is that he's not a reliable ally. The federal government's defence in some of this stuff is to say, look, this isn't some horrible thing we've done to your country. This is just a contract, and it's just a commercial deal, and we've ended the contract. It's not. It's much more than that. These enormous deals, which put one country's fate in the hands of another to a certain degree, and that you're trusting them to supply you with an essential strategic defence system and share their technology, and all of that carries with it. This is about trust. These things are about trust, and leaking documents or text messages or whatever after the fact will only confirm the suspicion that Scott Morrison is evasive or misleading. And the really difficult thing that Morrison faces at the moment, Bev, is that it's not just the French that he's having an argument with, because a one-on-one argument, it's he said and she said, and you can always, nobody has a monopoly on the truth. There's always differing stories, and you can make your case. But at the moment, Morrison's biggest problem is that he has two leaders of two allied countries, both accusing him of dishonesty or deception at the same time. Now, I'm not suggesting that they're necessarily both all telling the truth, and Morrison is uniquely at fault here. I'm sure they all have some truth and some distruth mingled in to suit their circumstances. But when it's two against one, then you're in deep trouble. And that's why this is such what I've called a politico-diplomatic disaster for Morrison.
Absolutely. And how often would you have known that two global leaders like this, of key allies for Australia, come out and accuse our Prime Minister of lying?
There's no precedent that I can think of, and that other people, having actually done some research on the subject, can find either. It's pretty unique circumstance, and I suspect that's why Morrison is looking so unhappy and taking desperate measures like this leaking of stuff, which is not going to make him look any more statesmanlike.
And then how reliable does it make Australia as a partner, Peter, when we are asking other countries to line up with us and support us against China's rising aggression within the region?
Well, in the final analysis, the big strategic interests of these countries are unchanged, and the French government, which has deep concerns now about Beijing, about Xi Jinping in particular, Biden likewise, Australia likewise, they will continue to converge. They will continue to cooperate after they recover from this. But that's big picture national strategic interest. In terms of the level of trust that I might suggest Joe Biden is willing to repose in Scott Morrison in future dealings, and we're going to have a lot because we are heavily involved and obviously depending on them for many things, including the nuclear submarines ultimately. It's not going to persuade Joe Biden that Scott Morrison is a trustworthy partner, and it's not going to encourage him to repose great personal confidence in the Australian Prime Minister. But Prime Ministers come and go, national interests remain.
And has it ended up being something of an own goal for Scott Morrison?
Well, as you know, the Morrison government falls back on what is a truth. I think that some level of French hurt, bewilderment, anger was inevitable. And when you break such an enormous contract, which has also come with a range of other accoutrements, if I can use a French word. In fact, the word diplomacy itself was originally a French word.
It was.
As you know. Then there's going to be a lot of ructions from that. Because remember, when they signed this deal, they also signed a bunch of agreements on all sorts of other things, unrelated things related to technology and a whole bunch of stuff. So all of that is now under question. So that's all true. It was going to create a lot of upset on the other side. But it didn't have to be done with the same level of friction and offence. There are many ways of giving someone bad news. There are many ways of breaking off a deal or a relationship, and we all see that every day in real life. And you can handle it differently. A diplomat's job is to say no to somebody while making them think you're saying yes. That's, and I'll quote an adage about the nature of good diplomacy. This government, again and again, is showing that it is just so ham-fisted that it, even if it's making the right decisions, and I suspect generally it is, they're done in such a clumsy and ham-fisted way, a la also the Australian call for an independent inquiry into the origins of the COVID virus, where Australia didn't do the groundwork and came out alone in the world, even though more than 130 countries, including China, eventually agreed to the proposition. Australia took an enormous amount of heat and trade sanctions over that, or at least that was the proximate cause of China announcing the trade sanctions. And now you have this, another debacle, where it's not the substance of the decision. I mean, Macron is not saying Australia had no right to cancel the contract. Joe Biden is not saying the same thing. It's all about the manner and the honesty or the dishonesty in the Morrison government's dealings with these governments. And that had to be avoidable.
And at the time that Morrison is squarely on the world stage at COP26, at G20.
Yes, which only increases his exposure and prominence and makes him a larger and more accessible target.
Peter, as always, thank you so much.
Pleasure, Bev.